As Vice Chair of the Commission, I call this meeting of the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission to order at 12:10. This Zoom webinar is being live streamed on YouTube at www.youtube.com/MICHSOS office/videos. For anyone in the public watching who would prefer to watch via a different platform than they are currently using, please visit our social media at Redistricting MI to find the link for viewing on YouTube. Our live stream today includes closed captioning, ASL interpretation, and Spanish, Arabic, and Bengali translation services will be provided for effective participation in this meeting. Email us at redistricting@michigan.gov for additional viewing options or details on accessing language translation services for this meeting. People with disabilities needing other specific accommodations should also contact redistricting@michigan.gov. This meeting is being recorded and will be available at www.gov/MICRC for viewing at a later date. This meeting is also being transcribed, and those transcriptions will be made available and posted on michigan.gov/MICRC, along with written public comment submissions. There is also a public comment portal that may be accessed by visiting michigan.gov/MICRC. This portal can be utilized to post maps and comments, which can be viewed by both the commission and the public. Members of the media who may have questions before, during, or after the meeting should direct those questions to Edward Woods III, Communications and Outreach Director for the Commission at woodse3@michigan.gov or 517-331-6309. For the purposes of the public watching and for the public record, I will turn to the Department of State staff to take note of the commissioners present.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Please stay present when I call your name. If you are attending the meeting remotely, please announce during roll call that you are attending the meeting remotely. And unless your absence is due to military duty, please announce your physical location by stating the county, city, township, or village, and the state from which you are attending the meeting. I will start with Doug Clark.
Present.
Juanita Curry.
Present.
Anthony Eade.
Present.
Brittany Callum. Rhonda Lang.
Present, attending remotely from Reed City, Michigan.
Steve Lett.
Present.
Cynthia Orton.
Present.
MC Rothhorn.
Present.
Rebecca Satella.
Present.
Janice Follett. Aaron Wagner.
Present, attending remotely from Eaton County, Michigan.
Richard Weiss.
Present.
Dustin Witches.
Present.
12 commissioners are present and there's a quorum.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Reinhardt. As a reminder for the public watching, you can view the agenda at www.michigan.gov/MICRC. I will now entertain a motion to approve the meeting agenda. Motion made by Commissioner Witches. Motion seconded by Commissioner Lett. Is there any discussion or debate on the motion? Go ahead, Commissioner Clark.
A minor detail, right at the end, it references future meetings in Grand Traverse Resort, and that should be changed to 12 p.m. to, I believe it's 8 p.m. It is 12. Yeah, right now it says
Yeah, I think 5 to 8 is what we had originally scheduled. Has that been changed?
I believe I read an email where it was changed.
The save the date was changed, but did the commission change it? Okay. So at this point, the 5 to 8 is what we have approved on our schedule. So the 12 would be a change in that, which I think we would need to take action on to change on the schedule. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, so in light of that further information, Commissioner Clark, do you still want to see that changed, or are we just going to table that for now?
We can table it.
All right, any further discussion or debate on the motion? Hearing none, it is moved and seconded that we will adopt the meeting agenda. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All opposed, please raise your hand and say nay. The ayes prevail and the motion is adopted. All right, Department of State, do we have any live in-person public comments or are they remote only?
Remote only.
Okay, thank you very much. Without objection, we will now begin the public comment pertaining to agenda topics portion of our meeting. Hearing no objection, we will proceed with public comment pertaining to agenda topics. Individuals who have signed up and indicated that they would like to provide live remote public commentary to the commission will now be allowed to do so. I will call your name and our staff will unmute you. If you are on a computer, you will be prompted by the Zoom app to unmute your microphone and speak. If you are on the phone, a voice will say the host would like you to speak and prompt you to press *6 to unmute. I will call on you by your name or the last 4 digits of the phone number. Also, please note that if you experience technical or audio issues, or we do not hear from you for 3 to 5 seconds, we will move on to the next person in line and then return to you after they are done speaking. If your audio still does not work, you can email redistricting@michigan.gov and we will help you troubleshoot so that you can participate during the next public comment period at a later meeting or hearing. You will have 2 minutes to address the commission. Please conclude your remarks when you hear the timer. The first person in line to provide public comment is James Gallant. Please allow a moment for our staff to unmute you.
Hello. Can you hear me, Madam Chair?
We can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Okay. This is James Gallant with the Marquette County Suicide Prevention Coalition. And these are my opinions. And I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. We start this meeting out and we can start this meeting out on the right foot because and my research is getting into the part about how blatantly this commission is just not following the rules and just willfully disregarding the Constitution and the rules of procedure, the fundamental principles of parliamentary law in America. So what I'm coming to now is the realization that it appears that this commission is acting out acts of civil disobedience, as if you're going to come in and change the rules, but just not doing it. And hopefully nobody will call you out, and hopefully you might win in court. And then you can just start doing this consensus building nonsense and call it the rules. And I know this because you changed the consensus thing in that flow chart, and you changed the policy, you changed the public comment, you changed the decision-making process, but you didn't change the rules of procedure. You did it in a policy down the line. It's all vague, and the facilitator gets to make the rules. And, this is I'll be filing a report here soon, but it's very clear. I'll get in another 2 minutes, right? So we'll pick this up at the next 2 minutes about how we're going to move forward and the document. We're going to codify your alternate form of rules that you folks are running. And there's a foundation. It's called the People Foundation. And what they said is that they're going to change the rules and reboot the system. And that they're going to do it through this redistricting process in the United States of America. And I'm here to, not to change anything. I'm going to make sure that you folks don't change it. Okay? And do I get 2 more minutes, Madam Chair?
You will after we, I have a little bit of commentary first, but thank you for addressing the commission. So the first opportunity for both in-person and remote public comment has concluded. Without objection, we will now hear from individuals seeking to provide a second 2-minute public comment. Hearing no objection, we will now proceed with individuals seeking to provide a second 2-minute public comment. Individuals who have signed up and indicated they would like to provide live remote public commentary to the commission will now be allowed to do so. We will use the same process as the first round. First in line to provide public comment is James Gallant. Please wait for the staff to unmute you.
Okay. Can you hear me again, Madam Chair?
Yes, I can, Mr. Gallant. Go ahead.
All righty. James Gallant, Marquette County Suicide Prevention Coalition again. These are my opinions. And so my research is coming to this idea, and I was reading and I get stuff thrown at me these days, because I've been searching you folks and this process and everything. And there was an article about these about how people are trying to change the Constitution. It's interpret the Constitution over time instead of this country was built in a Constitution 200 years ago, and it's still valid today. And all of the laws and rules and guidelines stem from it. And like the state constitution, and the fundamental principle of parliamentary law, they're all about the Constitution. And I mean, you folks are even just sitting here under the authority granted the governor or the people of the state under the Constitution, which is under the federal Constitution. And this is not to be interpreted, just interpreted on the side, and then you just figure you're just going to do something else other than what the processes have been presented to you. And it's fascinating. This is fascinating. And, you know, and some of the comments are just contemptuous that you've made. And it's kind of like, you don't have to be taken out of context. I assure you that, because they're your comments. And they're contemptuous towards our said Constitution. You know, you have one member that's only a half citizen of the United States of America, but you have a full oath of office right now to act fully under the Constitution and fulfill the standards in the United States of America and not in the Netherlands. And that was one thing, you know, that's actually a false statement right there. It should be corrected on the record, because it's not the Netherlands. In the United States of America, English is the approved language. And in language, it's not called Netherlands, is it? All right? It's called Holland. So we need to get some of these statements. And there was another couple other statements. And one statement that they were suggesting that people have asked you
Mr.
not
Gallant,
to
your allotted
follow
2 minutes
the
has
status
ended.
quo.
Please conclude your statement.
And following the rules is the status quo in America. So we'll get back with this. And thank you.
Thank you for addressing the commission. That concludes our public comment this afternoon. There is no unfinished business for today's meeting, so we will move on to the next agenda item. We also have no new business for today's meeting, so we will move on to the next item in our agenda, which is review and approval of minutes. We will now review and approve the meeting minutes from the July 8, 2021 commission meeting. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the July 8, 2021 meeting, which are posted at redistrictingmichigan.org.
So moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Lett,
Second.
motion seconded by Commissioner Ede. Is there any discussion or debate on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, please raise your hand and say nay. The ayes prevail and the motion is adopted. Thank you. We will now review and approve the minutes for the July 9, 2021 commission meeting. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the July 9, 2021 commission meeting, which are posted at redistrictingmichigan.org.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Rothorn, motion seconded by Commissioner Lett. Is there any discussion or debate on the motion? Hearing none, we will now vote on the motion to adopt the minutes of the July 9, 2021 commission meeting. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All opposed, please raise your hand and say nay. The ayes prevail and the motion is adopted. Without objection, I will ask our Executive Director Hammersmith to provide a staff report. Hearing no objections, please proceed, Director Hammersmith.
Good morning, commissioners. Happy to see everyone today. A couple of things I want to report on. First, I just got word that our meetings next week on July 29th and 30th will be held at Cadillac Place in Detroit. So I will send further details to you, but I wanted you to be aware of that. And then Commissioner Clark had asked for an update on the software installation on the computers. This has been an ongoing series of meetings. We had 8 to 10 meetings prior to signing the contract in May. We continue those meetings approximately every 2 to 3 business days. There were 4 caveats provided on July 7th, and we received the response from Mr. Brace on the 12th. So we've been working through those. We did get the MCS XXR review completed. The Form 3544 for the agency business owner data classification declaration is in the final review stage. There's another Form 231 that needs to be completed. We have to review an SSP, which is a system security plan, and a complete review takes about 6 months. So we have to document that we wish as a commission to forego that. And then there will be meetings between DTMB and our mapper, probably Fred from Citygate, Fred Hijazi, on the deployment package development. And the plan is to get it downloaded on one computer and then copy that to the other commissioner computers. It's been a very extensive process in order to be able to provide the software for the commissioners. We continue to work on it diligently. There are 4 to 5 people from MDOS and 4 to 5 people from DTMB who are working on these various aspects. It just understand that the security of Michigan is tight, as well it should be. And we're doing everything we can to get all the paperwork completed so we can get the software downloaded on commission computers. And in the meantime, the internet version can be used by the commissioners. So again, it's not as robust. They don't have the full database built yet anyway. They're waiting on some data from the state for that. So we will start working, the commission will start working with the software that is available through the internet, and we will get the software deployed on commissioners' computers as soon as humanly possible.
Thank you very much, Executive Director Hammersmith. Are there any questions or comments for our Executive Director? Commissioner Wagner, go ahead.
This is for Sue Ann. Sue Ann, is it possible to get a copy of the notes you just read to us so that we have that in hard copy, please?
I would be happy to forward the last update from the action items that were discussed at our last meeting. If that would help with the software. Is that
I
what
was
you're
just wondering.
asking?
Nope, I would like the whatever notes you just read off to us, because I can't write that fast and my shorthand is sadly lacking after 25 or 30 years. Can I get a copy of what you just read out to us from your notes, please?
Yes, I will be happy to forward the email and add some notes for the items that I had added to it. Yes. I'll be happy
Awesome,
to
thank
send that
you.
off to the commission.
Thank you, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions? Commissioner E.
Thank you, Executive Director Hammersmith. You mentioned a 6-month verification process of some sort. What does that process do exactly?
That particular item is a system security plan. It normally requires up to 6 months. They realize that we don't have 6 months to work through a security plan. So again, we are going to have to work through the paperwork to forego that security process.
And we'll have to decide as a commission to do that?
This is Bethany, the interpreter speaking. I'm sorry, Commissioner E, could you speak into the microphone? I didn't hear anything that you said, so I was unable to interpret that. Thank you.
Thank you, I apologize. And us as a commission would need to make that.
Again, I
decision
still can't
before-
really hear you.
Test 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me now?
That's better. Thank you.
Wonderful. We would need a motion to forego that 6-month process.
I assumed you didn't have 6 months. So in the process, so we're working as expediently as possible to get the paperwork filled out to forego that process while still having, great safeguards in place. I mean, the state understands that we do not have 6 months to go through a security process before we download software on commissioner computers. You should be finished by then.
Madam Chair. Yes, go ahead, General Counsel Pastor.
Commissioner E, that yes, that action would be taken through a resolution. I believe the executive director is compiling that information and completing those forms for presentation to the body, is my understanding.
Thank you, General Counsel. Okay. Commissioner Lang, did you have a comment?
I just didn't hear what Anthony's first question was, but interpretation. So I'm good.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Lang. Any additional comments or questions? All right, seeing none, thank you very much, Executive Director Hammersmith. Without objection, we will now move on to a staff report from General Counsel Pastel. Hearing no objections, please proceed, General Counsel.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to the commission and the public. My report today, I will keep it brief. I had the opportunity to attend a state legislator conference in regard to redistricting and bringing the materials back from that conference for the benefit of the commission. Again, it was focused primarily on state legislative redistricting commissions. So it was a strong focus on legislative privilege and other such things unique to legislative bodies that would not apply to Michigan's inaugural and historic Citizens Redistricting Commission that's focused on transparency and public engagement. So I look forward to be able to provide you those materials and also moving forward to let you know additional extensions that have been garnered in the United States. Mr. Adelson has indicated, and he and I discussed, that Maine's redistricting commission, again, a legislative committee, their deadline was June 1st. So they were given the extension that they requested. One unique thing that I did want to highlight from the conference was that Mr. James Whitehorn, the chief of the Redistricting and Voting Rights Data Office at the U.S. Census Bureau, he noted on multiple occasions during the conference that the legacy format data is not considered by his office to be the official data released by the U.S. Census, that the September 30th release that is being pushed out to all of the states is their office is considering the official census release data. The legacy format is something they are just making available on their website for those that choose to engage with it. And I know that this commission has formally expressed its intent to use that legacy data as processed by EDS to begin its preliminary mapping. So I did want to highlight that one key piece of information that that was expressed during the conference that definitely is relevant to the commission's work in Michigan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General Counsel. Next item on our agenda is an update from the Communications and Outreach Director, but it's my understanding that no update is needed today. So we will move on to the next agenda item, which is MDOS updates. Without objection, I will ask Sarah Reinhardt from the Michigan Department of State to provide a report. Hearing no objections, please proceed, Ms. Reinhardt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, Commissioners. I have two brief updates for you. The first being an update on your request for state ID badges. The requests have been submitted, and we've also provided them copies of your professional photos that were also taken, so that step should be taken care of. The next step, as relayed by my colleague Mustafa in an email yesterday, will be that you will receive an email from DTMB requesting what address the badge can be mailed to, and the badges will be physically mailed to your location, so you should receive those soon. My second update for you is that next week's venue has been selected, and it will be at Cadillac Place in Detroit for next week's Thursday and Friday meeting. A big thanks to my colleague Yvonne Young, who continues to work diligently to ensure that you all have venues to meet at for your meetings. So that concludes my update. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Reinhardt. All right, moving on to our next agenda item is number 10, correspondence. We have no correspondence to discuss today. So we're a little ahead of schedule, but at this point, unless there are objections, we will go ahead and take our recess until 1 o'clock.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Eid.
the next item on the agenda after recess is a 3-hour presentation from Dr. Petering. Instead of taking a recess now, since we were a little ahead of schedule, how about we do the first hour of that presentation and then take a recess after? If
Is
he's ready.
Dr. Petering ready, though? That would be,
He is not currently present.
that's,
I
yeah.
see.
So,
Never mind.
so any other objections to taking a recess until 1 o'clock? And we can take another recess in between that 3-hour meeting at some point. I'm sure people are going to need a break at some point. All right. Hearing no objection, let's proceed with our recess and we will reconvene back at 1 p.m. As Vice Chair of the Commission, I call this meeting of the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission back to order at 1:03 p.m. For the public record, for the purposes of the public watching and for the public record, I will turn to the Department of State staff to take note of the commissioners present.
Hi, Commissioners. Please stay present when I call your name. If you are attending the meeting remotely, please disclose where you are attending the meeting remotely from. I'll start with Doug Clark,
Present.
Juanita Curry,
Present.
Anthony Eid,
Present.
Brittany Kellum, Rhonda Lang,
Present, attending remotely from Reed City, Michigan.
Steve Lett,
Present.
Cynthia Orton,
Present.
MC Rothhorn, Rebecca Satella,
Present.
Janice Follett,
Present.
Aaron Wagner,
Present, attending remotely from Eaton County, Michigan.
Richard Weiss,
Present.
Dustin Witches.
Present.
12 commissioners are present and there is a quorum.
Thank you very much. At this point, the next item on our agenda is item 11, utilization of computer algorithms in mapping by Dr. Matthew Petering, University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I see you are on there, Dr. Petering. Welcome to the commission and thank you for being here today. If you would like to go ahead and proceed with your presentation, we greatly appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here today. And I'd like to share with you my PowerPoint presentation on an algorithmic approach to redistricting in Michigan. Okay, so I'm going to start to share my screen.
We can see
Can
it.
everyone see my screen?
Yep, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I'm delighted to be here today. Here's a brief outline of my talk. I was informed that there would be up to 3 hours for my presentation as well as a question and answer session. So I'm definitely ready to be here for up to 3 hours and delighted to talk with you about the following. Here are some, the outline with the rough duration of each aspect here. I'm going to share with you a little bit about my personal background. That'll be about 5 minutes. Then we'll go into Michigan mapping requirements and my interpretation of those requirements. That's going to be fairly detailed because there's quite a bit to cover there. Then I'll show you some Michigan data that I have that I've been working with. Then go over sample Michigan maps made by my FastMap computer algorithm, followed by talking about additional data that I would need for making maps this fall. And certainly during the presentation or afterwards, I'm ready to answer questions for an extended time period. So really delighted to be here. Thank you very much, commissioners, for everything you're doing. And it's very exciting to know that my neighbor state, Michigan, a state where I've lived for several years, is undertaking the process of independent redistricting. A little bit about my personal history. So I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and grew up there, born and raised, went to public schools in Milwaukee County. And then I did my bachelor's in mathematics at Washington University in St. Louis, finishing that up in 1999. After that, I went to University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and finished up my PhD in industrial and operations engineering there in 2007. While I was at Michigan to do my PhD fieldwork, I actually spent 2.5 years in Singapore, working at the National University of Singapore on problems related to the optimization and improvement of the productivity at the Port of Singapore, which at that time was the world's busiest container port, where you have ships being unloaded and loaded from all over the world there to be traveling the high seas to bring consumer goods all around the world. And I did some research at the National University of Singapore's the Logistics Institute Asia Pacific. That was while I was a PhD student. I did that field work. And then after that, I did take a faculty job actually right back home here in Milwaukee at UW Milwaukee. So I'm not at UW Madison. I'm at UW Milwaukee, which is the second biggest university in the state. It is a tier 1 research university. I guess you could say it is a little bit similar to Wayne State, in Detroit. So it is a little bit smaller than the UW-Madison, but we still have quite a lot going on here in Milwaukee. I want to talk just a little bit about my background and my research background and why I got into redistricting. So what do industrial engineers do? So I'm a faculty in industrial and manufacturing engineering here at Milwaukee, and I got my PhD in industrial and operations engineering. Industrial engineers really work to improve the productivity of complex systems. We're talking about factories, airports, warehouses, healthcare systems, maybe educational systems. And how do we do that? A lot of what we might do is to develop math or computer models to allow us to analyze complex systems and come up with schedules that are going to make best use of scarce resources. Oftentimes when you develop schedules for things such as, machine scheduling in a factory or airline scheduling or public, transportation scheduling, a lot of times there's a lot of trade-offs involved. You can't quite get everything that you want in your schedule. You might have something that's convenient for the customer, but it's very costly. So you want to kind of balance things. You want to keep costs down, but you also want to deliver something really good to the customer in the schedule. You want it to be good for the employees. You have a lot of things that are kind of trade-offs that you simultaneously have to think about when you develop a schedule for a complex system. And it's all about improving productivity and efficiency. And 4 years ago, in late 2017, I was thinking about other systems not typically investigated by people in my field. And I was thinking about the political system and realized that there might be a potential to use some of the techniques I've learned in computer programming and developing algorithms for optimizing things. There might be some potential to apply that in the area of, in the political realm. And it got me thinking about redistricting. And there have been people in my field doing research on redistricting actually going back to the 1990s. Although certainly more recently, I believe that people like me have really brought this to the state of the art and have really been able to do a lot more just in recent years than people have been able to do, with computers for redistricting, 10, 20 years ago. And so I got into this in late 2017 and was doing a lot of research on my own on this issue. And then decided I needed to make a computer algorithm that can automatically create districts, depending upon what the user inputs criteria, and the algorithm outputs a map in a timely manner that will generally satisfy the criteria inputted by the user. So anyway, that's kind of my journey. And so I'm really delighted to talk to you today about my algorithm and some preliminary results I've gotten for the state of Michigan. But before we do that, I think it's important we go back to the Constitution of Michigan and take a detailed look at the Michigan mapping requirements. By the way, please do feel free to interrupt. I will try to watch the chat. If there are questions, please don't hesitate to ask and interrupt me during the presentation. I think it's very important that we're all on the same page here to the extent possible in this online Zoom format. Okay, so the Michigan mapping requirements are set forth.
General Counsel, I'm sorry, Dr. P,
Yes.
1 second, please.
I do apologize to the doctor. I wanted for the benefit of the public to just give a very brief background. The doctor was invited here at the suggestion of one of our commissioners. And so we're here to receive the information that he's presenting. Again, the commission has not made any determinations or any decisions on the material that they're about to receive. And the doctor has not been retained by the commission. This is just for informative purposes. And I just wanted to make that clear before we get into the substance of the information we're about to hear. Thank you so much.
Thank you, General Counsel. Please proceed, Dr. Petering.
Okay, thank you very much. And so, yes, again, of course, all of the things here in the presentation are my, I guess, my opinions or my interpretations of things. So let's take a look at the Michigan mapping requirements as set forth in the Constitution, Article 4, Section 6, as amended in November 2018 to establish the MICRC. And I went directly to the website, which states this article, this section of Article 4. And basically verbatim, I have copied down the criteria for making maps. Well, first of all, we do want to keep in mind there are 3 types of districts we need to form: U.S. Congress, State Senate, State House. The commission shall abide by the following criteria in proposing and adopting each plan in order of priority. We're going to go into detail in each one of these. I'll just briefly go through them now. I mean, list the main idea of each, but then we will go in detail in the next half hour, 45 minutes. So part A is certainly we want the districts to be of equal population and to comply with the Voting Rights Act. B, the district should be contiguous. C has to do with communities of interest. D, having to do with political parties and giving a disproportionate advantage to a political party. The district should not provide a disproportionate advantage to a political party. It has to do with partisan fairness. E has to do with incumbents. F, with the city, county, and township boundaries. And G, with the compactness of the districts. So I'm going to take these one at a time. First of all, for the 3 types of districts, we just need to remind ourselves how many we're making of each: 13 congressional, 38 state senate, and 110 state house districts. Let's talk about part A, the equal population requirements. Okay, let's zoom in on that. First of all, what are we talking about? We're talking about total population. We're talking about any age, okay, counts here, and whether you're a citizen or non-citizen. Okay, any human being counts here. Now, for congressional districts, the equal population requirement is extremely strict. It really is that these districts must be within 1 person of each other. Or if by chance, the total state population happens to be an exact multiple of 13, then they should be exactly identical. Okay, but there's a good chance it's not an exact multiple of 13. So in that case, you're not going to be able to get all the districts with exactly the same population. And so you are allowed to deviate 1 person in those congressional districts. And going back to the last redistricting cycle, Michigan and almost every state complied with this requirement. Now, typically this will require splitting your small geographical units that you're going to be using as your building blocks to make the map. These might be census blocks or precincts. And we may have to split these up because these units have generally more than 1 person in them. So maybe a census block has maybe 30 or 40 people in it. A precinct might have, maybe 2,000 people in it. And so if you need to get those districts to essentially exact equality, it may actually require you to split the smallest geographical unit that is being used to form the map. And so that requires extreme detailed look. Probably to make this type of map, you first start with a rough map where the populations are, well, quite equal, let's say within 1% of each other. Okay, but then you really zoom in and then you make some really minor changes that probably aren't going to be affecting any of the other criteria down below to make sure then the populations are basically exactly equal. So I would say it's a 2-step process. Like when you're machining a part, you do a roughing cut to kind of get close to where you want to get, and then you get a final cut to really get the tolerance that you want on that part that you're manufacturing. So you kind of start rough and then get really fine down to 1 person. And that's what I would recommend for making those congressional districts. On the other hand, we have the state senate and state house districts that are by federal law, they do not have to be exactly equal. They are allowed to deviate 10% from each other maximum. So they could be within 10% of each other. That should be legally acceptable. In other words, within plus or minus 5% of the ideal or average district population, and that's typically acceptable. And Michigan was right about the 10% range last time when it did the redistricting. So in this particular case, we don't need to do kind of 2 passes at the redistricting. I think 1 pass is adequate. Just those small geographical units, whether you're using census blocks or precincts to make the map, those can remain wholly intact. You don't have to like split those up. Okay, so that's my take on the equal population requirement. Let's talk about the Voting Rights Act. Now, the Voting Rights Act deals with voting age population of at least 5 minority groups: Blacks, Hispanics, Asians, Native Americans, and Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders. Roughly speaking, here is what I believe is the way to go about complying with the Voting Rights Act. For each minority group, you do the following analysis. First, you want to compute its total VAP percentage in the state. Then, for each type of district, we have the congressional, state senate, and state house. So let's just say we're focusing on one of them, like state house. Okay, we're going to multiply that VAP percentage by the total number of districts. Okay, and I need to maybe go back here, but for Michigan, I believe, for example, the Black VAP percentage is 13.24 according to the last census, not the latest, according to the 2010 census. So you take that 13.24% multiplied by these numbers to get kind of roughly the number of majority minority districts that you would like to form that involve that minority group. Okay, so then, okay, so you multiply that by those numbers, then you round the result to the nearest integer, up or down. Let D be this integer, and then you're going to try to form D majority minority districts defined by having more than 50% voting age population within those districts belonging to that minority group. And an algorithm can try to do this, or a human being obviously can. Importantly, though, the minority group should be compact to justify forming each district. There were Supreme Court rulings that said that maybe you don't want to take minority groups from very far away locations and form a majority minority district with those two populations. You would like the minority group to have a pretty kind of dense and compact distribution to justify forming each one of those districts. And so this is my take on the Voting Rights Act. And how many majority minority districts were formed during the last redistricting cycle in Michigan for each type? Well, for Black majority districts, we had 2 congressional, 5 state senate, and 12 state house districts. And for the other minorities, we did not have any. And that was because they were not as high in population as the Black population, as well as they were not as concentrated. And so it was not possible after 2010 to create even one majority minority district involving any one of those other 4 minorities. Okay, so that's my take on the Voting Rights Act. And so,
Dr. Peter,
yes.
this is Commissioner Clark. First, would you like us to call you Dr. Petering or Matt or Matthew?
I guess if you call me Dr. Petering, that would be nice. Thank you.
Okay, great. Going back to your comments on the Voting Rights Act, when you determined your algorithms for this, did you consult with a voting rights attorney to see if that was consistent with what the Voting Rights Act says?
I have not yet consulted with an attorney on that. No, I have currently using, certainly one of my guidebooks that I'm using is the Redistricting Law book, okay, which has quite a bit of nice information in there. And it's made by the National Conference of State Legislatures. Certainly, this is definitely my first start in looking at that Voting Rights Act. I believe there's about a 40-page chapter on the Voting Rights Act and Supreme Court rulings, but no, I've not looked at talked to an attorney.
Okay, so your algorithm will determine how many majority minority districts need to be created in each of those 3 categories. The 2, the 5, and then the 12.
I would say that my algorithm can try to make a number of majority minority districts that are inputted by the user. And so the results I will be showing you later are actually kind of results saying, what if I applied my algorithm back in 2010 using that data for the census and making this number of majority minority districts 2, 5, and 12, which were the number that were made in the maps that Michigan is currently using. Now, certainly I could try to make more or fewer than these numbers. And when the new census data comes out, definitely there will be new analyses needing to be done about how many. One thing I know is the Hispanics, I can come up with a district with 40% VAP for State House. Maybe this time around, it's possible to make one with 50. I'm not exactly sure. We'll have to see what happens with the census data.
Okay, so these are really the 2, 5, and 12 are recommendations coming out of your algorithm.
In fact, no, they are numbers that, well, I can use my computer algorithm to either, make districts from scratch, or I can import a map and maybe try to, improve it or touch it up, or I could just import the map and show what did that map do in its, how many majority minority districts did it create. And so I took the map from 2011 or the last redistricting cycle, plugged that in my algorithm, and then found out that there were 2, 5, and 12 majority minority districts created of each of these types last time. And so that's where I got the 2, 5, 12. It was from the current Michigan map.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, because we've had a significant population shift in certain parts of the state since the last census. Okay, thank you, Dr. Petering.
Yes, yeah, I want to mention there is a caveat to my work with the algorithm. Well, we don't have the updated census data. And so what I'm using currently is 2010 census data. I'm not using anything updated since 2010. I'm kind of going to show you today, if let's say that for whatever reason, the 2010 data were exactly identical now and it didn't change now, what would my algorithm do? Or how would my algorithm have compared with the map that Michigan currently has? And so to do that, I take the 2, 5, and 12 as the inputs and the starting point for the algorithm to go to work to create those districts. Thank you for your question.
Madam Chair,
Yes, General Counsel.
I also had a question, if that's okay.
Certainly, go ahead.
Thank you so much. So actually, 2 questions that I would offer is, does the algorithm address at all coalition districts, or is it able to internalize racial block voting analysis and make suggestion regarding coalition districts?
Currently, the algorithm does not have that capability. Thank you. Yeah, certainly, I think it might be possible to do that, but I would need more detailed data to be the basis. The algorithm would need more detailed information about recent elections in order to be able to start to work on that issue.
Thank you. Any other questions at this point before I ask him to move on? All right, please continue, Dr. Petering.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we get to contiguity. Districts shall be geographically contiguous. Island areas are considered to be contiguous by land to the county of which they are a part. Pardon me, I have a slow system at the moment. I just have to stop my screen share. Let's see if I can get back to it with minimal delays.
We can see your screen.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's take a look at the contiguity requirement. Yeah, I think it makes sense. Every district has to be a single connected piece, although in Michigan, it's more interesting than some other states because you're very blessed with, I believe, 4 Great Lakes bordering your state. So here's a little peek at Michigan. Just a few things that I noticed based upon this requirement was like Isle Royale is in that county. There's a few islands way on the east side of Upper Michigan. Those are part of Chippewa County. Mackinac and Bois Blanc Islands are part of Mackinac County. These islands are part of Charlevoix County. Those islands are part of Leelanau. There is a little bit of a tuft there of an island. Harse and Strawberry Islands are part of St. Clair County. And so also, I'm assuming Grosse Isle and Belle Isle are part of Wayne County over there. And so that's kind of what is required and mentioned in the requirement. Now, one thing that's interesting about the wording, though, is that it does not mention which parts of Upper and Lower Michigan should be considered contiguous. So regarding Upper and Lower Michigan, okay, I don't think this wording covers how to handle those because Upper and Lower Michigan are not islands, and yet they are separated by water. Okay, so they're not contiguous. And the counties in Upper Michigan are a different set of counties than the counties in Lower Michigan. So there's no county itself that has parts in both, according to my knowledge. So it appears to me that some parts of Upper and Lower Michigan should be considered contiguous to allow a district to include parts of both. For example, these are Michigan's 14 congressional districts right now, and you could see this tan district at the top includes all of Upper Michigan and a fair bit of Lower Michigan as well. So obviously this district, according to the wording, is, well, it appears that it's not contiguous, or assumptions need to be made about what parts of Upper Michigan are going to be allowed to be considered contiguous with what parts of Lower Michigan. And I think there's some leeway there. But for example, can these two parts of Upper and Lower Michigan be considered to be contiguous? Like, could we make this orange district here and have a little patch of the orange district way up there as well and say, well, it's kind of close. It's only 150 miles. Okay, my answer to that would be no. Okay, what about the parts indicated by these orange arrows? These are a little bit closer. Okay, can those be considered to be contiguous? Okay, could you make a little district that looks like this? Okay, not involving Mackinac City or Mackinac Island, or, my answer to that again would be no. But the fact is that assumptions do need to be made regarding which exact parts of Upper and Lower Michigan are considered contiguous. And so my assumptions regarding this are the following. Here's a little zoomed in picture of the precincts, the voting precincts of the Upper and Lower Michigan area near Mackinac City. And where I've indicated with a line segment between precincts that my algorithm considers to be contiguous. And so I had to kind of hard code this in to the algorithm in order to be able to make, like, for example, a congressional district that includes both Upper and Lower Michigan. And so these line segments kind of indicate what I'm considering to be connected, which is right near the Mackinac Island area. And nowhere else is considered connected. So I'm being, only this little area there I'm considering has connectivity there. Okay, so that would deal with my interpretation of the contiguity requirements. Now we get to communities of interest. What I'm going to do is I'm going to discuss this later with the county, city, and township boundaries, because I'm going to be treating communities of interest. My interpretation of how to treat those is going to be similar with how to treat counties, cities, and townships. And so I'm going to talk about those together later on. Okay, so D, districts shall not provide a disproportionate advantage to any political party. A disproportionate advantage to a political party shall be determined using accepted measures of partisan fairness. Okay, here there's definitely some leeway for how to interpret this. To my knowledge, there are two main measures of partisan fairness: proportionality and the efficiency gap. Let's talk about proportionality. Well, I think a lot of us kind of have this idea of proportionality, like if a party wins 50% of the statewide vote, that if we use proportionality as our standard of fairness, then the most fair outcome is that that party wins 50% of the districts. If a party wins 55% of the total vote statewide, the most fair outcome is that it wins 55% of the districts, 60-60, 65-65, you just continue, and it just keeps going. And essentially the idea here is that if you use proportionality, your goal is to make a district map in which the proportion of districts expected to be won by a party is as close as possible to the total proportion of statewide vote the party has received in recent elections. Now, what about the efficiency gap? This was the basis of a Supreme Court case that did involve my state of Wisconsin. And it's interesting, I think there's some appeal in the idea of the efficiency gap. Efficiency gap is to try to equalize the number of wasted votes for the two parties statewide. However, if you, let's maybe back off of that for a moment and let's just take a look at what the efficiency gap is really saying in terms of its values. Now, it has the same value kind of and judgment if a party wins 50% of the statewide vote and you want to use efficiency gap as your measure of fairness, then according to that, the most fair outcome is that the party wins 50% of the districts. Now, what a lot of people may not know is that the efficiency gap really gets, in my opinion, a little bit skewed as a party wins more than 50% of the statewide vote. So according to the efficiency gap, if a party wins 55% of the statewide vote, the most fair outcome in which the efficiency gap is 0 is that that party wins 60% of the districts. If a party wins 60% of the statewide vote, according to the efficiency gap, the most fair outcome is that that party wins 70% of the districts. If a party wins 65% of the statewide vote, the most fair outcome is that it wins 80% of the districts. And so the numbers on the left will increase by 5%, but the numbers on the right will increase by double that, 10%. So you get to the fact where if a party wins 75% of the statewide vote or more, according to the efficiency gap, the most fair outcome is that that party wins all of the districts. And that is quite a bit different than the proportionality idea. And I'd be glad to go into a little more details as to why this is true and why what I put on the slide is correct. If you'd like, I could talk about that a little more. But let's go back to then my opinions regarding these two measures of fairness. My opinion is that proportionality is an appropriate measure of fairness. And my opinion is that the efficiency gap is not appropriate. It is a highly inappropriate measure when you have proportionality as a other option. Why is that again? It's because the efficiency gap says that whenever a party has more than 75% of the statewide vote, that the most fair outcome is for that party to win all of the districts. Like, for example, Massachusetts is a state where I believe the Democrats are at about 75% statewide. According to the efficiency gap, in Massachusetts, the Democrats deserve to win all of the districts. Okay, I don't know about you, but I'm not sure that that's fair. Okay, so now my other ideas regarding fairness, though, go a little bit deeper than just looking at, let's say, for each district, which party is expected to win it based on recent election results. Because you might make a map, let's say for Michigan, in which, let's say for state house, maybe Michigan is pretty close to a 50-50 state. Let's say we make a map for state house in which each party is expected to win 55 districts. Okay, so kind of a tie there. But what if one party has, let's say, no vulnerable districts, like all of their expected victories are by more than 10%. Well, what if the other party has, let's say, 30 vulnerable districts? Okay, that would also not be very fair, right? Because one party has no risk, the other one has tons of districts at risk, even though if you look district by district, they each are expected to win 55. So I believe that identifying which party is expected to win each district is not enough. We also need to look at the expected victory margins. And I propose putting this into 6 categories. We only have 2 major parties typically. So looking at this, how many districts are expected to be won by Republicans pretty securely, okay, safely by more than 10%? How many districts are expected to be won by Republicans by 5 to 10%? That would be a competitive district. How many districts are expected to be won by Republicans by 0 to 5%? That's very competitive. And then doing the same thing, kind of the mirror image of that for the Democrats. How many very narrow victories are expected? How many narrow victories? And then how many comfortable victories? And trying to make this the number of tight victories for the 2 parties as equal as possible. Okay, and so we might have the total number of victories to be maybe not completely equal because one party has a greater overall vote share in the state than another. But then when we get to the tight races, we would like probably we'd like to kind of make maybe this number pretty close to this one and this one close to that one. Okay, although these 2 may differ because one party may have more total vote in the state than the other. So this is kind of what I believe is I believe we should use proportionality in terms of total number of victories for each party or expected victories. And then the algorithm can then look a little more detailed as to the margins of victory and try to get those lining up a little bit. So each party has a similar number of vulnerable districts with a similar degree of vulnerability.
Dr. Petering?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Clark. Couple questions. I understand exactly what you're saying, and it seems logical to me. Have you discussed this with a expert or somebody that is an expert on partisan fairness to get their input relative to this approach?
Yeah, who is an expert? It's very interesting to think about. I would say that I have not certainly sought legal advice on this. On the other hand, I do think some experts may not have, let's just say in the area, may not have a very well-developed view of what is fairness. And I think there are some experts who have decided that they would prefer not to decide what is fair and not make the call as to what constitutes fairness and what is fair and what is not fair. And they would prefer to say, I can't do it. I don't want to talk about fairness. And, but that's maybe kind of avoiding, answering some tough questions. And so my belief is that rather than, I'm just saying some people in the legal realm, some people on courts have said, we aren't going to make a decision as to what's fair, or we can't. Members of this US Supreme Court. Okay. And, the question is that in the long run going to be okay for our democracy to think about that we're not going to make up our minds as to what constitutes fairness or not have those difficult discussions. And so I have to say, I admit I have not talked to a legal expert on this. I would say legal expert, I haven't gotten legal advice. Although I do believe this is a pretty standard approach for looking at fairness that's definitely well within something that could be considered legally acceptable.
Second question, Doctor. Your algorithm, can you adjust it? I guess you do that maybe by parameters, but to say that let's make it a 50-50 split as far as fairness goes within the state?
Yes. One of the main inputs in the algorithm So, kind of similar to the Voting Rights Act, I can input, a 2, a 5, or a 12 for that, for a particular minority group. For making districts of these, congressional, state house, state senate, I just put in a number, essentially, how many victories do I want for the Republican Party and how many do I want for the Democratic Party? And that is an input to the algorithm. The algorithm will then try to get that number. Now, of course, it's not going to be possible if you put, like in Michigan, like I want 110 victories for the Republicans, or I want, 105 for the Democrats. Okay, that's not possible. Okay. However, if you're towards the middle part, the realities are, I just want to say, I can give you any number close to the mid-range for either party. It's just the reality of there are trillions upon trillions of potential district plans, and there's going to be a range of the number of victories for, let's say, the Republicans, and there's going to be a range. And within that range in the middle, I can give you any map that you want. And for state house, it takes 30 minutes. For Congress, it's 10 minutes. Now, yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I don't know, is it scary? Yeah, it's kind of scary. But the point is that the way that I use the algorithm is I look at the recent total vote received by each party. For example, in the very tightly contested 2016 presidential election, that was razor thin margin won by the Republican candidate for president in Michigan. Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton by, I believe, 0.2%. And then essentially that's 50-50. And so then I would, if I populate my map with that data, then I would ask, because that's the data I'm populating it with, and that data is 50-50 statewide, then I am asking the algorithm to make a 55-55 map for House, a 19-19 map for Senate, and a 7-7 map for Congress. And then my algorithm produces that every time I run it.
What's interesting is we've had, I believe, 16 public hearings, and one of the things we hear a lot of is the population of the people that speak talk about competitiveness. And so if we decide as a commission that competitiveness is extremely important to us, we can force close to a 50-50 split, according to what you just said. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely. Now, I wonder, do you mean it competitive in terms of like for the whole state in the composition of the legislature, that it will be 55-55? Or are you meaning the margins of victory within the districts themselves? Because it might be possible to end up with you could have a lot of really close races won by, Republicans and Democrats by less than 10% here, but it might happen that the Republicans might end up winning 80% of those close races. And so that in theory could also be considered competitive, in that you had a lot of close races, but then after the dust settles and you find out how many people are being represented by the parties, it might end up being like 70-40 if by chance one party really got lucky and won a bunch of razor thin races. So may I ask, what do you mean by competitive?
Can I refer to MC on this?
I think we're one of the things we have not defined that competition. This is Commissioner Rothman, I apologize. And I don't think we have defined that competition, and we understand what you're suggesting is, at this point, both could be reasonable. And I think that's kind of what yeah.
Yeah. I do want to mention, I am delighted later in my presentation, I will show you maps that my algorithm has created that are kind of, I would say in both ways of looking at competitiveness, are outperforming the current map using a particular set of data. So in that it's a little closer to a 50-50, well, it's an exact 50-50 split in terms of seats expected to be won, but it's also, there's more of those victories are narrow victories than in the current map. And so, yeah, I can do both at the same time with the algorithm.
And I've got one point that I want to make to the commission.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't hear.
Commissioner Clark, do you mind? I have one kind of
Yeah, go
follow-up on
ahead.
what you were
Go
just
ahead,
asking.
Rebecca.
So part of the problem we have in Michigan is we have highly concentrated urban areas that are largely Democratic. So Detroit, Ann Arbor, so kind of southeast Michigan, and then Saginaw, Lansing, Flint. If you move to the west side of the state, Grand Rapids, Muskegon area tend to kind of tilt Democratic. But if you look at a map of the remainder of the states and the election results, it tends to really skew Republican. So I'm assuming that if we were to decide that we wanted to do a sort of more balanced or competitive map, then we would to some degree be sacrificing compactness and keeping the township municipal boundaries together. Would that be accurate, that it's sort of a trade-off because of how compact those Democratic areas are? We have to have more meandering districts to make them 50-50?
Actually, it's very interesting. I would say that if you look at the maps I will show later on, that actually it's more of sacrificing the, well, certainly one thing is there are a lot of trade-offs. This is really a hornet's nest of a problem. I mean, I didn't realize 4 years ago when I started looking at this, how many different aspects there are to look at, and they're all conflicting. Okay, every one of those criteria are to a certain extent conflicting with each other. And so, right, if you improve one aspect, it is likely that you might deteriorate in terms of your performance with other criteria. One thing I should mention is definitely it is possible to get a competitive, well, fair and very compact map. However, I would say the trade-off would be there might be less adherence to the county and city and township boundaries. That's what I'm finding, is that there's a trade-off between political fairness and those boundaries. That's one thing I can talk about later in the presentation, in a little more detail.
Yeah,
But
those boundaries are another item that came out in the public hearings a lot. So that's something we'd have to consider if we took this approach. I'm sorry, Rebecca. You were gonna say
Oh, I was
something?
just going to say thank you.
I want to make one comment to the commissioners. I believe in our last session with Lisa, she mentioned that she doesn't deal with this this item of partisan fairness. And then she suggested that we get an expert on that to consult with as we move forward. So that's one item we may want to look at in the future. Okay, thank you very much, Doctor.
Okay, thank you for your questions. Okay, let's move on to part E. Districts shall not favor or disfavor an incumbent elected official or candidate. Now, I feel here there are multiple interpretations, and one interpretation might be to try to make every district a highly competitive district, like with a narrow expected victory. Try to make a whole bunch of those districts. And in that case, you'd make a district in which, districts in which there's a 50% chance that each district is won by each party. In other words, that means there would be then a 50% chance that each district is won by an incumbent or by the challenger. Now, of course, incumbents probably have a little more seasoned political skills and probably still a little more likely to win than a challenger, even if it is a 50-50 district. Actually, maybe I should back off that. Yeah, I think that's one interpretation, to try to make a 50-50 map with a bunch of 50-50 districts, highly competitive. Another thing that might be a way to interpret this is to just ignore information about where incumbents live and do nothing else. Just not put that into, let's say, the algorithm. Or maybe use information about where incumbents live. And the algorithm can do this. It can find out, I've done this for Wisconsin. Putting in where the current state legislators and the current Congress people live, finding out in the particular new map, okay, where do they live now and in what district do they live? And then how many votes were cast for the Republican and Democratic candidate in that district? And then find out, well, which party has more votes, which party is expected to win that district, and find out, well, what party is that person from? And are they expected to kind of win or lose? And they're an incumbent. You could kind of predict how many of your incumbents are predicted to lose if the districts are drawn in a particular way. And the algorithm can do that. So one thing you could do, another way to maybe interpret this is to make a map in which, now, I'm not exactly sure, but make a map in which 50% of incumbents are projected to win and 50% are projected to lose, okay? Or maybe that's being a little bit too harsh. Maybe making a map in which 70% of incumbents are projected to win and 30% are projected to lose. I believe there may be multiple interpretations here. I would say this one is a little bit, I have probably a little bit less knowledge on how to handle this than maybe some of the other aspects. My current interpretation that I am using, at least in the maps that I'm going to show you today, is that I'm ignoring information about where incumbents live. It saved me a little time as well. That's a fair bit of data to collect to make sure you have those addresses and know where those incumbents live. So right now, I'm completely ignoring that information. That's my interpretation as to how to meet the requirement E currently, although I'm definitely open to other ideas for how to do that. Okay, so we're going to move to the item F now.
Could I make, this is Commissioner Clark, could I ask a question relative to that? Yeah,
Oh, yes.
I'd like to ask it of our general counsel. Are the legislatures required to live in the district that they represent?
Yes, the only representatives that are not required would be your congressional representatives to the US Congress. But again, the data, I would respectfully disagree with Dr. Petering that in the absence of incumbent data, that it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to determine satisfying this criteria. And again, he indicated it was his interpretation that to not have that data and approach it from a politically competitive standpoint, which again is his interpretation. But that data is a necessary component, maybe not considered at the very beginning. Again, we're working our way down the ranked criteria in the Constitution and how the voters have prioritized it. So hopefully that's responsive to your question, Commissioner Clark.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. And I would definitely be delighted maybe during the Q&A to learn about what do you feel is maybe for the legal counsel for the MICRC, what do you feel is the best way to handle this criterion? Because certainly I could do number 3 or number 1 as listed here with the algorithm. It's just, I think, a matter of just switching it up a little bit and rerunning the algorithm to maybe get a little bit better results or more legally acceptable results for this criterion. So that doesn't take me long to switch between interpretations 1, 2, and 3 here in the algorithm. F, districts shall reflect consideration of county, city, and township boundaries. Now here I'm going to revisit again C, communities of interest. Okay, districts shall reflect the state's diverse population and communities of interest. Communities of interest may include, but shall not be limited to, populations that share cultural or historical characteristics or economic interests. Communities of interest do not include relationships with political parties, incumbents, or political candidates. Now, my interpretation is to take a look at this in three different categories here for this group of requirements. And I think I'm going to start with the county. My interpretation regarding county boundaries is as follows. After a district plan is made to compute the number of counties that overlap with District 1, number of counties overlapping with District 2, number of counties overlapping with District 3, and so on, and adding those values up. The sum of these values for all districts would be considered the total penalty for splitting counties. And then the goal would be to try to minimize this penalty. Out of the total number of district county overlaps. My interpretation regarding city and township boundaries is very similar. After district plan is made, compute number of cities and townships that overlap with District 1, District 2, District 3, and so on. And again, sum these values up for all districts, and then consider that sum, okay, to be the total penalty for splitting cities and townships. Again, the more that the higher this number, the more, District 1 might have overlapped with, a lot of cities and townships. District 2 overlapped with a lot of cities and townships. And then overall, all the districts might have a lot of overlaps. Then that number those numbers you're adding up are high, and then that sum is high. And then you kind of have a higher total kind of penalty or penalty score for splitting cities and townships. And so you would like to minimize this penalty. Now, admittedly, though, according to my calculations, there are 1,306 cities and townships total. So one thing to make sure is that, each city and township has to be in at least one district, right? So the sum of this is going to have to be at least 1,306, okay? But that being said, we can try to minimize it. Now, my interpretation regarding communities of interest is as follows. Well, first of all, the boundaries of all communities of interest need to be decided. Once they are decided, I would consider this to be the same way as the others. After district plan is made, compute the number of communities of interest that overlap with District 1, number of communities of interest that overlap with District 2, and so on for all the districts. Sum these up, and the sum of these overall districts is the total penalty for splitting communities of interest. And we're going to try to minimize that penalty. And so my interpretation is that a community of interest is an area, geographically contiguous area that you want to keep within one district if possible. And so then it could be treated similarly to a county or city or township. And want to mention that each community of interest will have to overlap with at least one district, right? And so this sum, okay, is going to have to be at least as high as the number of communities of interest that are decided upon. Okay, so in the green, my interpretation is that a certain set of communities of interest will need to be decided upon and be fixed and say those are the final COIs. And maybe there might be 200 of them. Okay, then if that's the case, then this sum will be at least 200. Okay, but then, okay, maybe it would be exactly 200. If it's exactly 200, it meant that no community of interest were split. Okay, if it's 201, it means that there was one split. If it's 202, there were two splits. If it's 400, it means there were 200 splits. It meant that the average COI was found in two districts. And so overall, I think we want to try to minimize this penalty. And again, an algorithm can go to work in trying to do this because it's a quantitative measure. Okay, but in order to be able to do this, we do need to decide on the communities of interest. And so that's the part in green, which is, I think, the hard part here. And what makes it a little hard is that the US Supreme Court has provided scant guidance to define communities of interest, okay, according to this redistricting law book. But someone needs to decide those. To be honest, I don't feel qualified to decide what communities of interest are. But certainly, if someone gives me a list of those with their boundaries, I can plug that into the algorithm and go to work on minimizing those splits of the COIs. So this would kind of summarize my interpretation related to criteria C and F. Okay, related to G, districts shall be reasonably compact. Just a reminder, a compact district has a dense and solid shape. It looks nice to the eye without long or narrow regions. My interpretation and how to achieve this in the algorithm is to, after a district plan is made, to compute the following: the Polsby-Popper compactness of District 1. That's going to be a measure from 0 to 1. 0 meaning it's really non-compact. 1 meaning it's perfect. It's a perfect circle. Polsby-Popper compactness of District 2, District 3, and so on. Add these all up to get the sum of these values for all districts, and that could be considered the total compactness score of a district plan. And this score will then range from 0 to the number of districts formed, and we're going to try to maximize this score. This is another quantitative measure. Basically, all of these things are quantitative here, from A to G. And so an algorithm could be used to make compact districts. Let's just go into brief details. What is the Polsby-Popper compactness? It is the area of a district divided by the area of a circle whose border has the same length as the district's border. And so if you were to take that district's border, maybe as a really big border, well, that meant that if you could make a circle with the same border, that would be a really big circle. So you're looking at what is the area of that district kind of divided by the area of that circle. And so essentially, this measure is larger when a district has more area. And it is also, that means when this numerator is higher. And this is also a larger measure when the denominator is lower. Okay, in which, in other words, the Polsby-Popper compactness is larger when a district has more area and a shorter border. So just a couple examples with Michigan's current map. Michigan's 6th congressional district shown there. That's one of the nicer looking districts, I would say. Okay, pretty nice shape there. It's probably got a pretty good compactness score. Let's take a look at its area and its border length. Okay, based upon those, we can compute the compactness of 0.553. Okay, that's higher than 0.5. That's a pretty darn good district, I'd have to say. On a range from 0 to 1, typically you're not going to hit a 1 because a 1 is like a perfect circle. Okay, and a 0 is like, you know, something with the most horrible shape you could even imagine. Okay, so that's Michigan's 6th congressional district. Now, on the other hand, let's take a look at the 5th congressional district, the one in light green there. That one definitely has a less compact shape. We can just see it's longer and narrower and it has some kind of twists and turns in it. What is its area? Well, it has a lower area and it's got a longer border, okay, which means that it's going to have a smaller Polsby-Popper compactness. And if you do the computation, its compactness is about 4 times less than that of District 6. And so my algorithm is going to try to make districts that have high Polsby-Popper compactnesses and for all of the districts summed up. And I believe that, oh, okay. And then so again, this is because this has a higher compactness score, it is more compact. This one is less compact. So this is my interpretation of how to get compact districts using my algorithm. So overall,
This is Commissioner Clark again.
Yes.
Can you go back a slide, please? Yeah. Is the Polsby, is a Popper compactness methodology acceptable? Is it an acceptable standard in redistricting compactness? And do you know if it's acceptable, you know, in the courts and according to the VRA?
Yeah, it is acceptable. Now, I do know there are a few other measures of compactness, which also tend to kind of try to get at the same thing. You want kind of nice shapes. And I am aware that, there will be consultants who will deliver, I believe to, like, for example, Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission. I believe the final paperwork delivered by the consultant during the last redistricting cycle, I think showed for the districts that were formed, I think 3 different compactness measures, one of which was Polsby-Popper, to kind of show that the districts were somewhat, compact. So certainly Polsby-Popper is probably the #1 measure of compactness that's being used, but there are others as well. And it's definitely possible to, for a consultant to deliver multiple measures of compactness. Oftentimes they don't differ by a whole lot, maybe 10%, plus or minus 10% in the different ways that they measure compactness. But certainly in any measure of compactness will show that this 6th district is quite a bit more compact than that 5th district.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay, thank you for your question. Now, let's take another look at all of these requirements all together. One thing that is very interesting to look at is this wording in order of priority. Now, I believe that wording is now probably good, that it is a little bit vague in that it appears to be some flexibility here for how to interpret that. Why is that? It's because all of these criteria are conflicting. In my opinion, prioritization is a good start. Obviously, you want to have some priorities and generally have that laid out. But I don't believe that gives perfect detailed guidance regarding trade-offs among the criteria. Now, in terms of trade-offs, I don't really see a whole lot with A and B. A and B to me are really hard constraints that are less subject to interpretation, that you better have those satisfied or the map isn't even going to see the light of day. But related to criteria C through G, I think there's some interesting questions here to look at. For these criteria, how much of a higher priority criterion can be sacrificed to get better results related to a lower priority criterion? For example, is it okay to let criterion C get worse by 5% if that allows criterion D to improve by 30%? Okay, I believe that might be subject to interpretation there. Certainly we know that you can't have it the other way around. I mean, you're not, because C is higher priority than D, you're not going to allow C to get worse by 30% to improve D by 5. But the other way around still says that, okay, C is a higher priority, but maybe you could sacrifice it a little bit in order to get big benefits for D, or E, F, or G, or anything where there's something higher. Maybe for E, we might sacrifice that 1% to get a 30% improvement in G. Okay, how do we decide upon those? I don't know. I feel there may not be a definitive answer other than we certainly can't sacrifice more of a higher priority to get less of a lower priority. But it appears to me that there is some wiggle room for sacrificing less of a higher priority to get more benefit of a lower priority. And I feel in these mathematical optimization problems, this is typically the case where just by sacrificing maybe a couple percent in some categories, you can get huge gains in other categories. And so the way my algorithm kind of works is by giving a weight or an importance to these different categories, C, D, E, F, G, and using those weights to indicate that's the relative importance of those categories. So my algorithm does not say, okay, let's satisfy A, we're done with that, then let's go to B. then we're done with that, then let's go to C, then we're done with that, then let's go to E, then we're done, then let's go to E. My algorithm takes a look at essentially all of these together simultaneously and continues to improve the overall score, where the overall score is a weight, where actually the algorithm continues to reduce overall penalty. And the penalty is a sum of weighted components where you have a weight as to how important. Now A and B are simply kind of things that the algorithm just has to do no matter what. But when it comes to like these others, like C, D, E, F, G, the algorithm, the way the algorithm works is I put a weight. How important is C? Maybe that's 100. D might be 80. E might be 60. F might be 40, and G might be 20. Okay, so if that's the case, the algorithm will then have quite a bit of flexibility to make sacrifices for things at a higher priority to get much bigger benefits at a lower priority. But certainly it won't do the opposite. So I just think this is a pretty important thing to think about here. And it's, in my opinion, seems that there's a fair bit of wiggle room for trade-offs among criteria C through G.
Madam Chair,
Yes, General Counsel.
I certainly respect the doctor's opinion, but I would strongly encourage that the criteria are ranked in that order with that prioritization. And other commissions, we've spoken about that in the past. So I would just be remiss in my duties as the legal counsel for the commission if I didn't highlight that. I disagree strongly with the notion of wiggle room and with bifurcating the criteria in having in the manner that's being offered. And you know, again, I don't want to interrupt any further, and I do apologize to the doctor for the interruption, but it would, but I feel very strongly that I need to highlight this at this point, that the criteria are ranked, they are individually set forth. Some of them are mandatory, some of them are considering. So I don't think the language is vague at all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General Counsel Pastula. Please proceed, Dr. Peterson. I was going to call you Peterson. Petering.
Petering, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, well, thank you. I think this is a very interesting thing to think about. And I do thank the legal counsel for those comments. It's very interesting to think about this issue. And in my opinion, in my perspective, working with companies and looking at the private sector, trying to make, optimize things, is that the private sector typically will be operating in terms of using weights for categories in order to get overall best outcome, considering all categories, and not a strict prioritization. And so it's interesting that to what extent of course, but if these are just being considered, then yeah, what does it mean to consider a criteria? Yeah, so that's also very interesting because in previous, redistricting cycles, people have created maps that, they were supposed to consider compactness, but they really didn't, or supposed to consider something else. And then you look at the final result and you see that maybe it was not quite, seemed like maybe they didn't consider something as they legally should have. So it's a very interesting situation. So I do certainly believe in the weighted approach and that the weighted approach can really get very good results for generally almost all of these criteria, and a prioritization, if it's very strict, is likely to not have as good results overall across the board. Of course, that's my opinion. Okay.
Yeah, Doctor, this is Commissioner Clark. Let's say we took that approach that using the weighted averages. And we've done that in certain things here in the commission in the past 6 or 8 months. Let's assume you do that. How do you know that that approach is more successful to get to your end deliverable than by not using it?
Well, one way to do that would be to essentially look at a set of maps that are created or submitted by commissioners and judge those according to either the order of priority or by a weighted system, but judge them in apples compared to apples, and then find out which one has the best score. And then now, that's another potential way to make maps would be to say, hey, and now because, more data is online and on the internet, one potential would be saying, hey, everyone, here's all the data you need to start making maps. Anyone can make a map and you have to submit it, but here is how we will judge it. And anyone from the public can submit. We're going to collect couple thousand maps, and whoever has the best score by law will be the map that is enacted. So there are ways in which you could use quantitative, measures to kind of set up a framework to use quantitative measures to make the ultimate decision for what map is the map adopted for a particular state. And so there would be ways we can compute all of these things from A through G, have quantitative measures. On the other hand, we could go through order of priority. We could say that, okay, maybe A and B are kind of, you either satisfy it or you don't. Then you get to C, and then essentially you find out if you take the maps and through a process of elimination, okay, you could say, okay, we have 1,000 maps that have been submitted. Any map that does not tie for the best score regarding C is eliminated. Then go to D. Okay, among the maps that remain, any map that does not tie for the best score for D is eliminated. Then keep going down, okay, until now, okay, now, but if you happen to eliminate, oh, no, okay, no, you're never going to eliminate, okay, all the maps. So then you go to E, F, and G, and eventually there's only going to be one map left standing. And so that's a way to enforce a strict order of priority using quantitative measures as well. So that is possible to do as well, I believe, because I provided quantitative measures for C. D, I've talked about it quite a bit. I haven't actually given you the ultimate measure of that. E, I think can be measured. D and E definitely, I mean, in my algorithm, I have measures for that. F, G, these can all be measured quantitatively.
Thank you, Dr. Petering.
Thank you for your question. Okay, so that would wrap up my interpretation of these mapping requirements. It's really exciting to see so much at work, so much complexity, and a lot of criteria here. I like complexity, something that I enjoy trying to, make order out of chaos or complexity, or to try to get good results with multiple objectives that you're looking at simultaneously. So let's move to the data that
Dr. Petering, before we move on, I think everybody could probably use a 10-minute break just to get up and walk around, if that's all right with you. So without objection, we will now recess for 10 minutes. Hearing no objections, we will stand in recess till, let's say 2:35. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
call this meeting of the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission back to order at 2:36 p.m. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Absolutely, Madam Chair. Commissioners, please stay present when I call your name. And if you're attending the meeting remotely, please disclose your physical location that you are attending from. I will start with Doug Clark,
Present.
Juanita Curry,
Present.
Anthony Eade,
Present.
Brittany Kellum, Rhonda Lang,
Present, attending remotely from Reed City, Michigan.
Steve Lett,
Present.
Cynthia Orton,
Present.
MC Rothhorn,
Present.
Rebecca Satella,
Present.
Janice Follett,
Present.
Aaron Wagner,
Present, attending remotely from Eaton County, Michigan.
Richard Weiss,
Present.
Dustin Witches.
Present.
12 commissioners are present and there is a quorum.
Thank you very much. All right, without objection, we will now proceed with Dr. Petering's presentation to us. We'll go ahead and proceed, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I see Commissioner Wagner has her hand raised with a question.
It wasn't a question. I just wanted to propose that my fellow colleague, commissioners and staff, maybe keep questions until the end of Professor Petering's presentation so we can all stay on task. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Commissioner Wagner. Please proceed, Doctor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let me get back to sharing my screen.
And we can see your screen. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Just wanted to maybe, we've taken a little break, maybe had a little breather and stretched out a bit. Just a brief couple maps of Wisconsin, just briefly to show you related to compactness. These are 4 options for Wisconsin's 8 congressional districts. I want to just talk about district shapes and how they relate to fairness. A is the current 8 congressional districts, which is a 5-3 favor in favor of Republicans. The other 3 maps are 3 different maps I've made to kind of explore the different possibilities for number of victories for the different parties. This map is a 4-4 fair map made by the algorithm. Option C is 6-2 in favor of the Republicans. Option D is 5-3 in favor of the Democrats. And so here we have 4 different options for the districts for Wisconsin, all made by the algorithm. I'm sorry, A was not made by the algorithm. A is the current map, but B, C, and D were made by my algorithm. And one thing to note is that in all of these maps, the districts look pretty nice to the eye, okay, pretty compact districts. However, we have vastly different outcomes related to, number of seats expected to be won by each party. And so it's really interesting to see these maps kind of come with, I believe, a lesson that we all should be reminded about. And the insight is kind of that the district shapes do not tell us much about fairness. I know a lot of us may think that, we have a map with really bad shapes, therefore it's really unfair. And maybe then we also think because a map has really nice shapes, therefore it is fair. Okay, however, we could see here, we have a bunch of maps with pretty nice shapes, and C though is rigged in favor of the Republicans. D is rigged in favor of the Democrats. And so this comes with a cautionary lesson that we have to look beyond just the shapes, that even a map with really nice district shapes could be heavily rigged. And for better or for worse, my algorithm is able to typically make nice looking districts, but is able to do that either in a fair way or in a rigged way. Okay, and I'll be showing you the fair way later on. So let's get back to looking at the Michigan data that I collected. Now, I didn't really do a whole lot of collection. I'm really lucky. All the Michigan mapping data shown in this presentation, I downloaded from the Open Collection of Precinct Shape Files for U.S. States, collected and maintained by MGGG, the Metric Geometry and Gerrymandering Group at Tufts University. So I just want to thank them for an extraordinary effort that they have done to put together shape files of the precincts of about 30 different states that they've posted on this website here. Okay, github.com/mggg states. Without that, it really makes it a lot more difficult for me to work on other states. Wisconsin has a very quite a bit of information for Wisconsin online through this Legislative Technology Services Bureau. For other states, typically there isn't as much online. And really thank the MGGG group at Tufts, which has a large group of academics working on things that similar to what I'm working on with redistricting. That is headed up by Moon Duchin, a professor of mathematics at Tufts University. Now, in the data that MGG posts and the data that I'm using to make maps, the data is at the precinct level. Why? Because precincts are the smallest geographical level at which election results are recorded. So if smaller units, for example, census blocks are the building blocks that we use to make the districts, the previous election results for each of those small units is only estimated, it is not actual. Okay, because we don't know when you go to vote, they only know, how many total votes were cast for, we only know for each party within that precinct. Okay, you don't know how many of those votes came from which census block. Okay, and so if smaller units such as census blocks are the building blocks used to make the districts, predictions for which party will win a district and by how much will be less accurate than if precincts are used to make those districts. Okay, so I do believe, with my colleagues at MGGG, that using the data at the precinct level, if we are interested in things such as partisan fairness, the competitiveness of our elections, as well as incumbent victories, how many incumbents are going to win or by how much, that is all related to election data, and that data is precise at the precinct level, okay, but not at the census block level. Now, caveats on the data that I'm showing in this presentation. Obviously, I don't have all the updated data. We don't yet have the 2020 census data. And the data I'm using for this presentation is actually the population and VAP data for minority groups. It's based on the 2010 census. Okay, I am not using any community of interest information. I'm currently ignoring criterion C until more information becomes available as to what are the communities of interest in Michigan. I'm only using one set of election results currently from the 2016 US presidential election. Okay, Trump versus Clinton. Votes for minor parties, Libertarian and Green, are being ignored currently. So if we do ignore those, we only consider votes for the two major parties. Then we take a look at the victory margin for Trump. In that election, it was 50.1% Trump, 49.9% Clinton if you ignore the votes for the minor parties. In other words, that's basically a 50-50 down the middle, which would mean that my algorithm is going to try to make a 55-55 map for the state house, a 19-19 map for state senate, and a 7-7 map for US Congress based on those election results. Now, later in my presentation, I will mention what data I really need. I would need to make a map this redistricting cycle. So I would need more updated data, obviously, from more recent elections, although this is still an election that I think should be used to make a map. But I think we need the 2018 gubernatorial election and the 2020 presidential election data as well. I'm currently ignoring incumbent home addresses. Let's take a brief look at the visualization of data. This is just a look at population density in the state. And obviously we see, Detroit, Ann Arbor, Flint, Saginaw, Bay City, Midland, Lansing, Battle Creek, Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, Muskegon, and is it St. Joseph? So anyway, we can obviously see the population is concentrated in the southern part of the state. Oh, Traverse City up there as well. Here's a map of the Black VAP percentage. And really, in order to make a majority minority district, that district needs to be at least 50% voting age population, which means we're looking at this dark green color here, and you want to see where is their dark green. Up here, okay, there's just not enough concentration to form a majority minority Black district here, or wherever there's no dark green, it's literally impossible to do. Where there is dark green, then the algorithm is going to try to make the number of districts that I mentioned earlier. And so almost it looks like it's going to be happening in the Detroit area, possibly Flint and Saginaw. Hispanic VAP percentage in the state looks like this. Again, now we can see there's almost no area where there's a dark green, just a small part of Detroit there. My algorithm was able to make a district of 40% Hispanic VAP, one House district, but still that's not the 50% that I think is legally needed to make that majority minority district. The Asian VAP percentage, we see there's no area in the state at all that is dark green. And I apologize, I did not put the Native American or the Hawaiian or Pacific Islanders, but again, they do not have enough concentration to be able to form a district. This is a visualization of party preference going from blue favoring the Democrats heavily to favoring the Republicans heavily. Again, this is based upon the 2016 presidential election. As one of the commissioners mentioned, we could definitely see that in the metropolitan areas, it's blue, and everywhere else, generally, it's red. Okay, so it's a very, interesting and complex state for redistricting. Just to zoom in on party preference, here's the Grand Rapids area with Muskegon. Oh, I'm sorry, in Holland, it wasn't St. Joseph. My apologies there. Okay, we can see that area. Up in the right side, we see the Kalamazoo here. This is Kalamazoo, Battle Creek. I believe maybe that is St. Joseph.
I think that's Benton Harbor, or St. Joseph and Benton Harbor above it.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I apologize. I'm trying to improve my Michigan geography. Then another slide showing the zoom in of the political party preference in East Lansing. Now, I should mention that the darkest red is 4-to-1 red. It's mean 80-20 Republican or more, and the darkest blue is 80-20 Democratic or more. And then you have a bunch of shades of blue and red in between. On the right side, we see Saginaw here, Bay City, and Midland. And then we see the Detroit, Dearborn, Flint, and Ann Arbor metropolitan statistical area. And we can see there's quite a bit of blue in those areas, as was previously mentioned. Okay, so again, taking a look at the state as a whole, this again, I've highlighted each of the 4,800 precincts according to how that precinct voted in the 2016 presidential election. And if there's a light shade of blue, means a slight edge for the Democrats, slight shade of red, slight edge for Republicans, up until, hugely favoring the Democrats, hugely favoring the Republicans. Okay, a reminder, how many counties are there? There's 83 counties, and the borders of those are put into the algorithm. And then there are, according to my count, 1,306 cities and townships, that every part of Michigan is part of either a city or a township, I believe. And I looked at that and have imported that into the algorithm. Okay, so let's take a look at some sample Michigan maps created by the FastMap computer algorithm. Just a brief summary of the algorithm. It does automatically generate election districts for any US state that satisfy criteria inputted by the user. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, I've put weights for the criteria, and that would be the way that the algorithm can prioritize one criterion over another, is by giving it a higher weight. First, you do need to normalize those to make sure that they're measured on the same scale. So, for example, number of victories for a party might be only measured on a scale from 0 to 110, but you might have, population deviation might only be, from 0 to 10 in terms of percent. And so 0 to 10 versus 0 to 110, those aren't comparable. So then you need to first normalize it to make sure that they're kind of on the same overall scale. Then once they're normalized, then you can put weights for each one. And then those weights do reflect how important they are in kind of impacting the overall penalty score in the algorithm. The algorithm basically continues to search for district plans with lower and lower penalty. And basically after I give it a time limit, like 30 minutes for state house, 30 minutes for state senate, 10 minutes for US Congress, and then it gives me the best thing it found within the time limit. It can be run multiple times to produce varying maps for US House of Representatives and state senate and state house. So each time I run the algorithm, it does give me a different final result. So it is randomized. So it does search kind of randomly for improvements that can be made. And so then you can get a whole variety of maps. It doesn't give cookie cutter maps that are the same every time you run it. So even when the settings stay the same in the algorithm produces a different final map every time. Although typically those final maps typically end up having similar performance for the different criteria if the setup and the settings and the weights for those criteria are not changed. Typically the maps that are created are somewhat comparable in terms of how well they achieve those criteria, but they may look quite different. The algorithm does handle the immense complexity of the redistricting decision in a timely manner. Okay, we're looking at, a computer operates at about, maybe 2 gigahertz. A gigahertz is 1 billion operations a second. So we're talking about, a machine that is kind of trying to do like what a human being would do. Kind of like if you were going to make districts yourself manually, how would you try to achieve these criteria? And I've tried to program the algorithm to mimic things that a human being would do to try to make good districts. And but the nice thing about the algorithm is that it is extremely fast. So it can do 1 billion little computations in a second, which can really shorten the amount of time taken to create a map. So the algorithm is essentially, the final output of the algorithm is it is assigning 4,809 indivisible existing Michigan precincts to districts. The final output of the algorithm is essentially a 2-column spreadsheet with 2 columns. One column has the precinct number from 1 to 4,809. The next column says, okay, what number district is it assigned to? Let's say from 1 to 110 for state house. And so you get just 2 columns, and you get that as the output of the algorithm. And then that can then be taken into like a GIS software for visualization purposes to color things according, the precinct according to what district it belongs to. And then you get these colorful maps. So let's take a look at Michigan State House districts. First of all, let's take a look at the current map that is currently being used. According to my analysis, population deviation of these districts from the most deviated, the most populated to least populated is 9.96% within that 10% requirement. There are 12 Black majority districts. There are no other minority districts for other minority groups. when this map is populated with the results from the 2016 presidential election, 67 of these districts have more votes cast for the Republican candidate than the Democratic candidate. 43 of these districts have more votes cast for the Democratic candidate than the Republican candidate. There are 166 district county overlaps. Now, this number has to be at least 110 because there's 110 districts formed. Okay, so then above the 110, there's an extra kind of, you could say 56 splits. This is the number of district and city township overlaps. Again, there are 1,306 cities and townships, according to my calculation. So then this has to be at least 1,306. Because each city or township has to be in at least one district. But above the 1,306, how many extra? There's about 207 splits. Now, the compactness score, according to my computations for Polsby-Popper, is 40.56. And there are 21 competitive districts out of 110 are won by less than 10%, where either, you know, Donald Trump carried it by less, if that, you know, sorry, where Donald Trump carried it by less than 10%, or Hillary Clinton carried it by less than 10% in the 2016 US presidential election. Okay, let's take a look at a map created by my algorithm. It looks like this on the right. Again, we're coloring the precincts according to what district they belong to. So here, the algorithm has decided there's a whole bunch of precincts up there, and they all have, I don't know, the number 1, or they're all assigned to District 1. And then so when I take this into a GIS software, I just say anything that has a 1 for the district is colored red. And then this might be 2, 3, 4. And so that's how I get the rendering here. And let's take a look at how this map performs. It has a population deviation of 9.5%. It has 12 Black majority districts. No other majority minority districts. It is a 55-55 map. When basically, if these had been the districts at the time of the 2016 presidential election and everyone, you know, cast their votes the same way, you know, in the 2016 presidential election, again, 55 of these districts would have more votes cast for Donald Trump than Hillary Clinton. 55 would have more votes cast for Hillary Clinton than Donald Trump for that election. There are quite a few more district county overlaps and quite a few more district, city, or township overlaps. The compactness is quite a bit better than the current map. I think you can see there aren't really any strange shapes in the map, or maybe one, whereas the current map has a number of districts that have maybe non-compact shapes. And we have 34 competitive districts here that were won by Donald Trump by less than 10% or won by Hillary Clinton by less than 10%. And so if we're looking at, you know, these different categories and criteria for comparing these maps, I'm using a smiley face to indicate which map does better for which criteria. Population deviation, if you're looking at it, the FAST map is doing a little bit better. In terms of partisan fairness, it is hitting the 50-50 goal right on the head, hitting the nail on the head there. But in terms of the overlaps, certainly the current map is doing better. Compactness, the algorithm is doing better, as well as competitiveness. And although I'm not sure the competitiveness down here is a criterion that's listed in the Michigan Constitution. So that we need to keep that in mind, but certainly a number of people talk about competitiveness, so I put that in here. So overall, I guess it's, up to you to take a look, but I'm pretty happy with the results of the algorithm. Certainly, as was mentioned, I do believe there is a little bit of a trade-off here. I think there's more overlaps, okay, here with more counties being split, more cities and townships being split. But I do believe that allows you to gain quite a bit in other categories, like political fairness, compactness, and competitiveness. Now, I actually should mention, I didn't have a whole lot of time to prepare for this presentation. So I believe I didn't really know for sure that I was presenting today until Sunday night. I was pretty sure I was presenting today, but I wasn't for sure. So let's just say I had a little bit of a short timeline to prepare. I do believe I could improve the get similar results for these other categories while improving district, county, and district, city, township overlaps, and get these same results here for these smiley faces here. Could I get results as good as that? I don't think so, to be honest. Yeah, so, but I do think I could certainly close the gap and maybe get this down to maybe 200, maybe get that down to like 1,600. To show quite a bit of improvement, because I was basically on a really short timeline to just run some experiments here, but certainly not, I believe I didn't even attach a weight to trying to, in my algorithm, I don't even think I put a weight on this one, the district, city, and township. I think I put a weight on the county one, but I didn't put a weight there. So these results are a map that was pretty good in some aspects, but certainly I think I could do a little bit better with minimizing overlaps. Now, let's just do a little bit of a deeper dive in terms of the victory margins here. So in the current map, here's what I have my analysis shows that we have 67 Republican wins, 55 of which are comfortable, 5 of which are narrow, 7 of which are very narrow. For the Democratic wins, we have 34 comfortable, 4 narrow, and 5 very narrow. Okay, and so that's how the 67 breaks down into these 3 categories for the Republican wins, and the 43 breaks down into these 3 categories for the Democratic wins. And again, if we add up, then these are the narrow ones, the 5 plus the 7 plus the 5 plus the 4. That's where I get the 21 competitive districts. Okay, let's take a look at the little bit of a deeper dive at the FAST map, where we have a 55-55 map. Here we have, for the 55 Republican wins, now it is not, globally it's perfectly symmetrical. Okay, but if you look a little bit of a deeper dive, it is not, this is symmetrical, but in fact it is not perfectly symmetrical. Okay, if you look at how many comfortable wins each party has, the Republicans have 41, the Democrats only have 35. Okay, if you look at somewhat narrow victories, Republicans have 8, Democrats have 12. If you look at very narrow victories, Republicans have 6, Democrats have 8. Okay, so if you do a deeper dive into this FAST map, you will see it is still a little bit in favor of the Republicans. They have a little bit fewer districts kind of at risk than the Democrats. Fewer vulnerable districts. However, overall, I think we can see that it's quite a bit more fair than the current map, which has, about 21 more safe Republican wins than Democratic wins, whereas this one has 6 more safe Republican wins than Democratic wins. Here we have 34 competitive districts, won by less than 10%, adding up the 8 plus the 6 plus the 8 plus the 12 here to find out how many districts are won by less than 10%. So I kind of like certainly, you think about the amount of political activity and responsiveness of representatives and senators to their, I'm sorry, representatives in the House to their constituents. Typically, I think some people feel that these representatives are more responsive if they're in a competitive district. And so, this might be a good map for fostering competition and responsiveness to the voters, as well as fairness for the political parties. Now, I can go into a little bit of a deeper look at just to see what do these maps look like in Detroit. This is what the current map looks like in the Detroit area, and this is what the proposed map looks like in the Detroit area. And so you can see these, I guess, in Detroit, fairly compact for the fast map. Here, you can see there's a lot of straight lines here. Also, one thing to look at is, I believe this is the Wayne County border right here. So look at the adherence to the county border is exact and precise in the current map. To be honest, the fast map doesn't really adhere to the county border a whole lot, but certainly makes very nice looking compact districts with the overall goal of fairness as priority D being kind of maybe the highest priority. And so this would be kind of the look at a map created by the algorithm for State House. I'm okay with answering a few questions if there's a question or two, as well as waiting till the end. I have basically 2 more maps to show for State Senate and US Congress and a few closing remarks.
Any questions, anyone right now? I am not seeing any questions, so please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to State Senate. Here's the current map, population deviation. There are 5 Black majority districts, no other majority minority districts. When populated with the data from the 2016 presidential election, we find that in 23 of the districts, there's 38 districts total. In 23 of them, Donald Trump received more votes than Hillary Clinton. In 15, Hillary Clinton received more votes. There are 102 district county overlaps. Now that number has to be at least 83 because there are 83 counties. So each county is going to overlap with 1 district at least, and maybe more. So we want to think about how much does this exceed 83 by? That's the amount of kind of splits there are of counties. Okay, and then this is the 1,473 is the number of overlaps between the districts and cities. And again, that number has to be at least 1,306 because there's at least 1,306 cities and townships. Compactness score is 11.24, and we have 5 competitive districts out of 38. Not a very competitive map. What did the algorithm create? Okay, we have a population deviation a little bit better, the same number of majority minority districts. It is a 1919 map when populated with the data from the 2016 presidential election. Donald Trump wins 19 districts, Hillary Clinton wins 19 districts. There's quite a few more district county overlaps and district, city, and township overlaps. The compactness score is better. The districts are a little less oblong, a little more dense and solid. And now we have 12 competitive districts instead of only 5. So if we look at lining these up, and it's pretty similar to the last map, we have better population deviation here. We have better result for partisan fairness. Not as good, the current map is better for the minimizing the overlaps, minimizing the splits of the counties and the splits of the cities and townships. But the algorithms map is better with compactness and better with competitiveness. And we could do a little bit of a deeper dive politically in terms of those victories for the parties and by how much. So here are the breakdown of the margins of victory. Here There are 20 Republican wins by at least 10%, 1 Republican win 5 to 10%, 2 Republican wins, very narrow, 1 very narrow Democratic win, 1 narrow Democratic win, and 13 comfortable Democratic wins. So again, if we add up those 5 numbers in the middle, those numbers here in the middle, that's giving the number of competitive districts here, which is only 5 out of 38. Now, going to the fast map, here's the breakdown. We have, I mean, not only globally a more fair map, but certainly as you drill down, it's more fair than the other map. The number of comfortable wins for the Republicans and the Democrats are very close. There's 14 comfortable Republican wins, 12 comfortable Democratic wins, 4 narrow Republican wins, 5 narrow Democratic wins, and 1 very narrow Republican win, and 2 very narrow Democratic wins. Okay, so this is a pretty symmetrical map, although not perfect symmetry. And we have 12 competitive districts, adding up these numbers in the middle here. Okay, 4 plus 1 plus 2 plus 5 gives us 12 districts. So we have about a third of the districts are competitive here, whereas in the current map, it's maybe about 15%. Okay, we could do a little bit of a zoom in on the Detroit area just to see what those district shapes look like. Here's the current map. Okay, again, we can see Wayne County line right there is really, whoever made the map was really strict about county boundaries. That was a guiding, I can definitely see that was a guiding principle in creating the map. Okay, now in the algorithm, I guess there is a weight attached to minimizing the district county overlaps, but it's not as high as other weights for things like political fairness. And so then really, this is what the fast map has come up with. Now, I think it could do a little better for minimizing the overlaps. I probably need to juice up the weight on that category a little bit more. But then if we do that, probably we wouldn't be quite as good with the political fairness, but maybe we could get now here's again with the issue of the priority. I mean, maybe we could sacrifice the political fairness by 5% to get 30% improvement in the county boundaries for the algorithm. Okay, that might be possible. Whether or not we want to do that, that's another question. Or whether that's even legally allowed based upon the prioritization listing of the priorities of the criteria. I don't know, it may or may not be legally allowed. Okay, so then this wraps up the look at the state Senate districts. Let's take a look at the congressional districts. Now here I've talking about 14 districts. The reason is I want to compare apples with apples. So we have a current map that has 14 districts, and then I want to make the kind of a proposed map created by the algorithm that can be compared to it. So I need to make 14 districts. Of course, if I were to make a map for Michigan later this year, after the census data comes out, I'd be making one, with 13 congressional districts. Okay, so here's the current map. The population deviation in this map is 1 person. There are 2 Black majority districts. No other majority-minority districts for any other minority group. According to when populated with the 2016 presidential election results, we have 9 Republican and 5 Democratic wins. There are 97 district county overlaps, 1,447 district city township overlaps. Again, because there's 83 counties, this has to be at least 83. Because there's 1,306 cities and townships, this has to be at least 1,306. The compactness score, 3.17. There are 5 competitive districts out of the 14. Okay, so that's pretty good. Okay, more than a third. Way better than the state Senate map has 5 competitive districts out of 38. So this one is definitely a more competitive map than the state Senate map. Let's take a look at the algorithm map created by the algorithm here. Now, because we're using larger pieces as our building blocks, we're using the precincts, and they have about an average of 2,000 people per precinct. We're definitely not able to get to the legally required 1% deviation. Okay, so I set the algorithm to have a 1% deviation. If we wanted to make a map for Michigan using this, we have to go with a 2-step process. We need to first make like a rough map, kind of like what I'm showing you here, and then go in and use maybe Autobound Edge or some other software to really zoom in and, to the level of the census blocks, and maybe even split a couple of census blocks to get to the population deviation of 1 person, which is legally required. Okay, so this map is not yet legally acceptable. Still has a pretty good population deviation, but not close to being legally acceptable. We have the majority minority districts, same as the current map. This is a 7-7 map. We have 121 district county overlaps, 1,501 district city township overlaps. Compactness score is better than the current map. And we do have 1 more competitive district, 6 competitive districts. So if we're looking at, stacking these up again, we find that the current map is better for population deviation than this rough map, which has been created based upon using precincts as the building blocks. The fast map is better for fairness, but the current map is better for minimizing overlaps. But again, the fast map is more compact and more competitive. And let's take a little bit of a deeper dive again in terms of the victory margins for the parties. 9 Republican victories 6 are safe, 2 are narrow, 1 is extremely narrow. For the Democratic wins, we have 3 comfortable or safe victories, 1 narrow, and 1 extremely narrow. So, of course, any one of these that's kind of in the middle range could go the other way. So here, essentially, the Republicans going to get at least 6 victories, but they might pick up to 8, 9, 10. They might go up to 11 victories. Okay, the Democrats are going to have at least 3, and they might get up to 8, kind of maxing out if they have a really good year where they get like 10% more people just turn out for the Democrats than other years. So we again have 5 competitive districts. Here, the fast map, let's take a deeper dive there. Here's the breakdown. We have, for the 7 Republican victories, 5 comfortable, 0 narrow, 2 very narrow. The Democratic ones, we have 3 comfortable, 1 narrow, 3 very narrow. And 6 competitive districts here. And, I want to mention here why I'm not sure we're going to be able to get to perfect symmetry here. And it's just the idea that the Democrats are a little bit more packed in urban areas. And the Voting Rights Act requires the creation of districts which tend to be heavily Democratic. And so typically, we're not going to get to perfect symmetry here. I don't believe, even if I reran my algorithm, many, many times, I don't think you'd find a map with a perfectly symmetrical result, although this one is getting in the ballpark of being a lot more fair than the current map. So that would be the summary of these maps. Again, just taking a little look in the Detroit area. Now, this is a little bit interesting in that here, the Wayne County border in the current map is not quite adhered to like in the other maps. And we have some very, non-compact shapes in the Detroit area. The FAST map kind of just tries to make things that are nice looking and fair, essentially, and I think does that pretty well. So just a quick idea of the trade-offs. So this would wrap up kind of my look at the maps. And I have a couple more slides to go, but this would be the main, portion of my presentation is finished. Why don't I talk briefly about the trade-offs in Michigan redistricting? One, I do believe is political fairness versus keeping counties intact. To think about this, we can think about, let's do a thought experiment. What if we perfectly keep the counties intact and somehow magically are able to, wave a magic wand and keep all counties perfectly intact, and then find out for each county how many districts worth of people are in that county. And let's assume all of those districts made from that county are politically identical to the county as a whole. So they all go the way that the county as a whole goes politically. What would be the result for Michigan? So in other words, if no counties are split, and if all districts within a county are politically identical to the county as a whole, we would have this for our splits. Okay, in terms of how many districts would favor or be won by each of the parties. Okay, why is this? It's kind of because the total population in the counties favoring Republicans is higher than the total population in counties that favor Democrats. So if you don't split up the counties at all, what you will be doing is you are essentially saying that, okay, 53% of the state, we're going to kind of isolate the state into two groups, well, into 83 different counties. Some of the counties are either in this group favoring Democrats or this group favoring Republicans. The counties in this group have more people, so more districts worth of population in those counties, okay, than the population in counties favoring the Democrats. So essentially, my best estimate for if you keep counties intact, just this based upon this kind of thought experiment and then just looking at results, county by county results for the returns, election returns from the 2016 presidential election in the counties, and as well as the population in the county. And doing this analysis tells me that if you go about keeping counties intact, you're probably going to end up with about this in terms of your portion of districts won by each party, roughly. Okay, and what about if you keep cities and townships intact? That becomes even a little more skewed. So no cities or townships are split. Okay. Okay, and we do the same analysis. We find that the map is going to be more skewed in favor of the Republicans. And that is because we find the total population in cities and townships favoring Republicans is that, and the total population in cities and townships favoring Democrats is that. And it's about a 58-42. So we would expect the final map to be a 58-42 map if this were the only consideration in making the keeping cities and townships intact were the only consideration. And so, but then that seems to be in opposition to the criterion D, political fairness, which appears based on the 2016 presidential election says we should be making a 50-50 map. And so there's some definitely tension there. And you can see that in the current map of Michigan's current maps versus the maps made by the algorithm. Okay, the current maps tend to be a little more in these percentages, whereas the algorithm is 50-50. The current map does a great job of keeping cities and townships and counties intact, whereas the algorithm does a great job at the political fairness, but not vice versa. Okay, so there are other trade-offs in Michigan redistricting. Certainly, my algorithm is able to perform valuable analyses concerning these trade-offs among the criteria if such analysis is desired. And the algorithm could identify how much improvement is possible for a lower ranking criterion by sacrificing a given amount of a higher ranking criterion. If that is desired to be known, I can find that information out using my algorithm. What data do I need to make updated maps? Well, okay, so again, the maps I showed you are not updated. They're obviously not legally acceptable this time around. We don't even have the 2020 census data yet. Plus the maps did not consider more recent elections like the 2018 governor's election or 2020 presidential election. Only looked at 2016 presidential election. So what data do I need to make updated maps and to make fair maps and maps that can look at these criteria? I would need the data at the precinct level. Why? Again, because precincts are the smallest geographical unit at which election results are recorded. So I do need the 2020 census data that needs to be obtained, particularly, total population of each precinct, total VAP of each precinct for the total voting age population of each precinct. And then for the 5 minority groups, I need their VAP of voting age population in each precinct to be able to adhere to a criterion A. I do need the 2018 gubernatorial election data organized by precinct. Okay, and in that data, in that election, Democrats had 54.9%, Republicans 45.1% if you ignore the third parties. But I need the number of votes received by the Republican and the Democratic candidate in each precinct. Okay, and then the 2020 presidential election data, on which Joe Biden received 51.4%, Donald Trump 48.6% of the votes cast for the 2 major parties, ignoring the third parties. Okay, so I would need that data. And also the home addresses of all incumbent legislators, congressmen, and congresswomen to look at the incumbents and to be able to predict how many are expected to win and by how much. I would need the boundaries of all communities of interest so that I could treat that just like the county, city, and township boundaries, but they would be treated at a higher priority. So then I could have a measure of how many COIs are split and have that as a criterion C. And so one thing that's interesting is in Wisconsin, this data is generally available. The government, the Legislative Technology Services Bureau in Wisconsin, I called them up on the phone. I mean, they regularly post GIS shapefiles containing basically all of the updated data that I mentioned on the previous slide, except communities of interest and addresses of legislators. But they post election data, geographic data, demographic data from the census. And that they told me by September 15th, they're going to be able to give me that shapefile, which I need, the GIS shapefile, which I need of the election precincts in Wisconsin containing the updated census data, as well as the 3 elections worth of data to verify political fairness, and that they're going to get that by September 15th. So I can definitely use my algorithm to make a map for Wisconsin. But will Michigan's CSS be able to post similar information on its website? I'm not sure. I haven't been able to really get that information yet. I was, they're supposed to get back to me related to information requests I've been making. I haven't really heard back from them, but I don't believe that they've posted the data at the level of what Wisconsin provides, unfortunately. So if I can't get the data from there, where can such information be obtained? Citygate GIS, I've talked to them. It appears that they do provide quite a bit of this in their Autobound Edge program, but that's for a fee. That's definitely possible, I think, to obtain that. And then maybe not all of the election data might be in there, but they do have it at the precinct level for census data, they told me. And it is possible to then upload this election data from, let's say, spreadsheets, and then connect that to the GIS shapefile that's part of the Citygate software. So then in that case, I would be able to use my algorithm to make updated maps. Just a couple other questions, just about who will double check the maps made by commissioners and consultants for Michigan. I think that's an interesting question. And what are the plans for the redundancy in the MICRC's work? Because it is extremely, obviously, tedious, time consuming, and 1 decimal point off can make a huge difference in the overall analysis of any map, or 1 digit wrong, or and so I just, hope that that there's enough redundancy in MICRC to really be able to get some great maps made this year and have them all vetted and verified with all the data, confirmed. And I just want to mention that I'm certainly glad to assist the MICRC going forward. If there's any needs, please don't hesitate to contact me. My email address is matt.petering@districtsolutions.net. And my company website is www.districtsolutions.net. With that, I'll close and see if there are any questions from the MICRC. Thank you so much for inviting me to present today. And I've really enjoyed the questions and the discussion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Petering. This was very interesting. Let me look around the room and see if anybody has any questions for you. Commissioner Clark?
This is Commissioner Clark. Could you tell us how many states you've contracted with, your company is contracted with, relative to the 2020 census and the redistricting that's going on?
I am not at liberty to share that. I am talking to multiple states.
When you said you're talking to, that means you have not contracted them yet, or are in the process, or what?
That is correct. I have not yet contracted.
Thank you.
I believe Commissioner Wagner has her hand up. Commissioner Wagner, go ahead.
Oh, I'm not sure we can hear you. Can you unmute?
Oops.
I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you first to Dr. Petering for coming and presenting to us. And I had a question because you had pulled out the VAPs and that how we have 2 Black voting age population districts already, but we don't have any others. And Michigan is such a diverse population. What can we do now to assure that they would actually have eventually a district? Is it all related to they all have to move into the same area? That's kind of my question.
Yeah. Well, from my understanding of Supreme Court rulings is that the Voting Rights Act really is there to avoid minority vote dilution, more than diluting them more than their current kind of share of the statewide population. And so currently I do see that according to the 2010 census that Hispanics were 3.5% of the VAP in Michigan, Asians at 2.3%, and Native Americans at 0.5%. And so the question is now, according to my computations, now those percentages do equate to a certain number of districts for the House and Senate, if those populations are compact enough. So according to my computations, the Hispanics, there are 3 House districts worth of Hispanics of voting age population in the state of Michigan. However, when you look at where they are located, they are living in a little more dispersed fashion throughout Michigan. And so I did put my algorithm to work to try to make one 50% VAP district and was not able to do that, although I was able to make one 40% VAP district. Now, that is something I have to be honest that legally I am not sure at this moment of whether it is appropriate to instruct the algorithm to go ahead and make that one Hispanic 40% VAP district or not. But certainly in order to definitely kind of have to do that, then you really need the 50%, I believe, threshold to really then say that, okay, now if you don't make the district, you are illegally diluting the strength of the Hispanic voters. So I feel that maybe in the 2020 census, maybe there will be the ability to make that one House district. But for the Senate districts, there would be one Senate district worth of Hispanic voting age population. But in that case, the Senate district is just too big, and there was no way to make something even close to 50% or 40%. For Asians, there are 2 House districts worth of Asian population in the state of Michigan, but according to my map, I was looking at my map, and there was the maps I made showing the VAP, there was no even one precinct in the state that had a 50% Asian VAP. So I think it's interesting to think about, can this be considered as part of the communities of interest? I'm not sure, maybe not though, because I believe that was explicitly worded that it wasn't. So I feel that is a very interesting situation.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, General Counsel.
Sure, I'll just jump in here as a lawyer. So the issue is, if you look at it just on race alone and the percentage, that's very, very dangerous. The other part of the analysis that's so critical when you're talking about the VRA is the ability to elect candidates of choice and looking at your racial block voting analysis. And all of that data is critical to feed into that analysis. It's not just percentage of population. It's not just percentage of voting age population. In the same way that your equal protection considerations are not just the number of people or that 10% population deviation for state legislative is definitely not considered a safe harbor by the courts. So again, the algorithm, I'll just stop there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, General Counsel.
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot to think about in a lot of the redistricting issues. It's a lot of legal aspects here. And so I do believe my algorithm is probably the closest that we're coming to being able to do automated redistricting.
Madam Chair?
Yes, General Counsel.
Actually, I was just going to acknowledge that the algorithm completely disregards the third criteria. So at least in Michigan, I would disagree with that statement.
Okay, thank you very much, General Counsel. Do we have any additional questions?
I would just like to mention that once the communities of interest are decided and their boundaries are decided, the algorithm can definitely consider those, just like a city or township or county.
Thank you, Dr. Petering. All right, I am not seeing any additional questions. Thank you very much for your presentation, Dr. Petering. I'm assuming that will be available for members of the commission to look at a later date. I'm sure our executive director will take care of making sure that we all have that. And we appreciate you taking the time to come and speak to us. This was very informative, and I do appreciate you taking the time to meet with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
At this point, without objection, we are going to move on to our next agenda item, which is future agenda items. I will ask our executive director, Hammersmith, to share about future agenda items. Hearing no objections, please proceed, Director Hammersmith.
I have none for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point, we will move on to announcements. Are there any announcements that anyone has today? All right, seeing no announcements, we will move on to the next item on our agenda. Executive Director Hammersmith, I'm sorry, did you have any announcements as well?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. As the items on the agenda have been completed and the commission has no further business, I will consider a motion to adjourn. May I have a motion to adjourn? So moved by Commissioner Witches. Seconded by Commissioner Curry. All in favor, please. I'm sorry. Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All opposed, please raise your hand and say nay. All right, the ayes prevail. The meeting is adjourned at 3:42. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great day.